Guys, my heart just can't take this damage. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen a film before? I know, it's kind of a weird question to ask, and I'd assume that most everyone who's watching this video is well enough off to have seen at least one good film in their lifetime, and can list off reasons as to why they think that film is good. For me, that film has always been, or at least consistently been, the Grand Budapest Hotel, which I'll get around to reviewing eventually because this is my third or fourth time mentioning it in videos that are not directly related to it. I like that film because of its dark and surreal sense of humor. I really like Wes Anderson's sense of cinematography and framing and all of that. There are specific aspects of Grand Budapest Hotel that I can say that I enjoy or that I like. But what I like most about film is that there are countless ways to go about storytelling. There are countless ways to go about cinematography, to the point where any sort of possibility of film is basically limitless. Yes, some films do share aspects with each other, but just because Inception and Star Wars are science fiction films doesn't mean that they're similar in any way. Now let me ask you a second question. Have you ever made a film before? I myself have been making short films and sketches and shorts here and there over the last few years, and I feel like I'm partially qualified to tell you that putting any effort into putting something onto a screen takes a considerable amount of time, effort, and consideration. That investment of time and money is then exponentially expanded upon in the realm of actual filmmaking, since there's far more people and way bigger corporations involved than my friend and I just sitting in our backyard with a camera. For me, I would just spend a week or two in high school writing up a script, and then my friend and I would take a camera and record it basically whenever we had free time. Over time, our location and set requirements improved as our general filmmaking improved. Would I say that any of these films were actually any good? They were all right. I'll put a link to my favorite two that I made in the description below, and I'll let you guys be the judge. What I learned through these experiences is that there's a lot more that goes into a film than we actually give credit for. We're all critics, sure, and we're to critique a piece of art, but I think it's so much more interesting to see how that film got made. What I also learned is that I can write, I kind of know how to direct and frame things, I can keep a story together, I can keep continuity going. What I can't do though is I can't act to save my life. Given the right parameters, and if I actually had the time and money to invest into actual live action filmmaking, I could probably make some pretty banger films with what I know now. And at the very least, it would help if I was focused on making the video and not being in the picture itself. There's a particular quote that, when it comes to skits and sketches, I always kept in my mind. Mike Peters, the creator of Mother Goose and Grimm, when advising a young Chad Carpenter, the creator of Tundra, told him to draw what you know. This, of course, is cartoonist to cartoonist stuff, but it can be applied to pretty much any art. And I took it for myself to mean to film what you know. I know that I can't film something as massive as a superhero drama, but I know that I have an interest in documentaries and in history, and that I live in a fairly auspicious and diverse city. Hence, I think that creating a biopic of the city that I currently live in would be a pretty great start for me, because it's what I know. I had to preface this review to Allegiance of Powers with all this nonsense because the film is exactly what I'd be afraid of making myself. The amateur approach to just about everything makes it blatantly clear that the directors were in way over their heads and didn't know what they were filming. Well, actually, they didn't know how to film, write, edit, or anything for that matter, and my 80-minute experience was so painful that this is only something that I wish upon the prisoners currently held at Guantanamo Bay. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, grab a drink, grab some popcorn, book an appointment with your optometrist, and let my British friend MoonWalker and I explain to you Allegiance of Powers, the worst film ever made.
Greetings, 'tis I, the Moon Man. Now you're probably wondering, Moon, how did you come across the holy grail of movies that is Allegiance of Powers? Well, the answer is simple. I didn't. My dad did. You see, my dad has this natural gift for sniffing out the worst movies possible. Spaceships too. For some reason, Allegiance of Powers was rebranded as Mutants. Now, I'm not the kind of guy to take the piss out of something just because it's cringe or bad, but holy moly, this movie pushed me to my limits. I subjected Kai to this torture, so it's only fair that I contribute to this video.
Yes, my experience was rather painful, but I'm glad to know at least that this film exists. Like, yeah, I can understand if this was a film released in 2006 with a bunch of indie YouTube creators trying to figure out, a kind of fun film with their friends with the limited software that they have in the time, but this is a 2016 release, and poor Moondad had to actually spend money on this. Sure, tech has improved a lot, even within the last 4 years, but that's still no excuse for how this film looks. You can shoot even decently good looking films on your phone nowadays, and the film had a $2,000 budget, so getting a top of the line cell phone was well within that range, but clearly wasn't prioritized. Now you might be wondering to yourself, Kai, you've been on the screen a lot in this video, actually more consecutively than you've ever been in a video before. Yes, you are correct, very observant of you, and that's for a very good reason. I'm warning you now, what you're about to see is unsettling, will be forever burnt into your brain, and will cause any film major watching this to pass out. Also on a slightly more serious note, this film has really bad lighting and kind of like rapidly flashing things at times, which might trigger an epilepsy, so consider this an official epilepsy warning as well. Okay, here we are with the, good God, what is that? Ladies and gentlemen, what you are seeing isn't a result of my poor internet or my outdated graphics card. No, this film really opens up at 12 frames per second. And what is this layer of snow that's been very obviously added in post supposed to be? I asked MoonWalker, who may I remind you owned the DVD version that his dad had to spend actual money on. He said that the audio in this film is really that bad. And, well, it didn't give me a lot of hope for the rest of the movie. This snow layer is actually meant to simulate ash falling from the sky as the character on screen here walks through a destroyed city. We never, and I mean never, in the entirety of this film learn who this character is. And here's the worst part. He's not set up to be a minor character or somebody like Thanos that warrants a cameo at the end of a film because of his involvement in the expanded cinematic universe. In fact, he's in the prime position to be the main character because this entire movie, it's set from his perspective. What happens is that this character, whom I'm calling the narrator because he's also never given a name, uses this off-screen omniscient computer to replay events that led to the city's destruction 6 days prior. There's so many issues with this approach to storytelling that I don't know where to start criticizing it. It's cliche, it's lazy, it diminishes the narrator's importance in all of this, but the absolute worst offense has to be that every time the narrator wants to switch perspectives, this loud beeping sound is heard.
And what am I looking at?
You have arrived 6 days into the future.
And it painfully reminds you that everything's a recreation that's just being told from the narrator's perspective. This entire trope is immediately dragged down by the way that it introduces the characters to the film, how it avoids any reasonable progression, and how it avoids any proper segues into other locations. Also, every time that the film wants to introduce a new character, a box of neon green text appears that has their name, their personality trait, and a very, very vague description of what their superpower is. There's no specific focus around a certain character or a transition to make the shot obvious that it's about them. It's just an awkward freeze frame and then some neon text with this computer synthesized voice talking over it.
Computer, who is this?
This is Kai, a video essayist on YouTube. Please subscribe.
Just like the storytelling leading up to it, I don't know what's the worst part of this. The green box isn't animated in any way, it just kind of appears there. The text looks like it was taken from 2005, and despite how the film thinks that it's told you everything you need to know about a character, the descriptions of the characters are about as vague as the details surrounding Jeffrey Epstein's death. Like, what is this power description? Smoke? The only smoke I know is from Rainbow Six, and the only thing he does is violate the Geneva Convention.
What's in the canister?
You muppet!
Person? Kaye. No, son of Cain. These guys clearly don't know their Bible. The son of Cain was Enoch, you idiots. I also love how the narrator has this omniscient computer with the knowledge of the universe that can perfectly recreate exact scenes from nearly a week prior across several 100,000 acres of land, only for some characters to not be introduced to the film because the film wanted to keep them as a secret until later on.
What is so special about her?
The absolute worst part of all this is that these half-assed introductions would at least be passable if the characters introduced as such were all minor characters that we see for maybe a split second. Yet even then, that's not a good enough excuse. A minor character shouldn't have that level of impact on a screen, and the traits of a major character should be revealed through dialogue and action, not boxes with neon green size 48 times New Roman.
Before Kai and I watched this film, I gave him a challenge and said, "Oh, by the end of this, by the way, I want you to guess who the main characters are." And now I'm challenging you to do the same. Here is a list of every prospective character numbered in this film. I want you to guess who the two main characters are based on only their appearances. Finish guessing? If you chose Dumb and Dumber over here, then you're correct. Pat yourself on the back because it took me 2/3 of the goddamn movie to figure that out. Now, you're probably wondering, who are our intrepid heroes? Well, this is Egotan. And this is Cybersting. And they're eco-warriors? Also, they're superheroes. Their goals are to recycle, fight bad guys, and recruit new members to their organization, the Allegiance of Powers. Out of all the characters, these two have the most jarring and bizarre introduction. The scene starts off with one of the already established characters being mugged by some random dude with smoke powers, when our heroes happen upon the scene after doing some shopping, probably at Tesco's. Being a crime-fighting duo, they intervene in what is probably the funniest scene in the entire movie. I'm just gonna let it play out, trust me, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Hey, Kai here, in the editing sequence to tell you that I was a complete idiot when I was recording this and we lost most of this sequence, but I think that the point still gets across even with the segment that we lost. Anyway, back to the video.
It'd be dangerous. Yeah, I know. There we go. Oh, it fits.
We're just back to the Tesco shopping.
Nice. Yeah. All right, let's go find some fun. You guys just made a huge mistake. Oh, recycling is never a mistake.
Do you have anything else? For the orphans? Who was that man?
Yep. That just happened. I bet you weren't expecting him to go all, Star Platinum and Crazy Diamond on his ass. I'd like to also point out that plastic bags are very bad for the environment. I'm just saying, Mr. Eco-Warriors. If I'm being honest, the main characters are probably my favorite part of the movie. In a way, having such goofy main characters contrasting with the edgy and brooding ones adds a weird charm to them. I mean, just look at their character pages. Egotan's weakness is literally guns, and Cybersting's weakness is he's constantly seeking love. I can kind of relate. I especially love his quote, "Why did Cybersting cross the road? To stop crime." I'd say you can't make this up, but somebody clearly did.
Okay, so we've established that the characters and writing are beyond terrible, and that the movie fails to understand basic congruent storytelling. But before we address that, can we talk about the cinematography and choreography in this movie? I know that it's hyperbolic to say that a film is unwatchable, but this film truly is unwatchable from a visual standpoint. Most scenes are either too dark or so overly color corrected that it's washed out and just as impossible to make out. In this scene here, they're attempting to introduce a character with her old friend a box of fluorescent text, and at a glance you can hardly tell that the character is even there. And heck, if it weren't for me and the film freeze framing at this exact moment, you probably would have missed him entirely. To fully explain why, I need to explain some basic cinematography. Now, if I'm the main focus of the shot, I would ideally be in the center, with my chest or midsection being in the dead center of the shot. There are exceptions to this rule, like if you have a shot that's not a wide or a medium shot, or if you want to place someone on the side of rule of thirds, or if you want to give these feelings of claustrophobia or smallness by having whatever is up close or towering over you with a different angle. Whatever the angle is, the general rules of thumb are that 1, you need to have your main focus is face, mostly in the shot, and 2, you need to use the screen up to its maximum potential. So for example, if I'm on the left third of the screen, it feels incredibly awkward if I talk over the camera or if I look off to the left of the frame without filling this space appropriately with graphics, for instance. However, if I look off to the right side and talk across the camera, it's less awkward because the empty space here is then filled. Now, if I add a person on the right side like so, and I start addressing them directly, it feels less awkward because I've now filled that space and it feels like a proper shot.
So now that you know that, what's wrong with this shot? Well, basically, it goes against everything I just said. Ignoring the horrible lighting and color correction, look at where this character is placed, on the far left side of the frame with only half of their body in shot. If I bump up the brightness a little bit here, you can see that they're also looking off to the left of the frame and there's nothing to fill the void on the right side of the frame. The only time you ever want to have this angle is if you're doing some avant-garde film art piece or if the character placed here is an extra, like someone standing ahead of a main character in a crowd. Clearly neither of which are happening here. This may seem incredibly nitpicky, but there are just so many shots that are blatant sins against cinematography that I need to limit my focus and frustration to at least one of them. Aside from that, in some scenes there's a constant dark filter over everything, supposedly because it makes things more dramatic. And then in the lighter sections, it looks like someone edited the movie on Instagram and pumped the sharpness filter up to full. In the intro segments and segments in the city, the color correction takes on this green hue with terrible lighting that makes every drop of liquid on somebody, whether that be sweat or blood, glow with this unnatural luminescence. I mean, you know it's bad when I can't see a character's face because of how dark it is, but I can see those teeth as clear as day because they're lit up like Chernobyl. There's 1 or 2 shots in here that are blatant and terrible attempts at getting shots of one actress's ass, a few shots that are straight up reused multiple times, and still a few shots that are so grainy and washed out that I honestly can't tell what's going on half of the time.
This film is a complete mess. It looks like someone cleaned the camera lens with the scum that forms at the bottom of your kitchen sink because they thought that the soap was still good to use. This was meant to be my segue into how good audio can sort of save a film or video, but not even the sweetest of condenser mics could possibly save this level of filmmaking. That being said, the audio quality in this film is more painful than the filmmaking. Maybe that's the video essayist in me talking, because I know that the quality of my audio automatically determines the quality of my video, despite how many crazy or wacky animations or good edits I can make. Back in 2015, I bought a $250 camcorder camera, and it's actually still the one that I use to record stuff on now. Mostly because I never found it necessary to switch, but now that I'm doing more on-camera segments, perhaps it would be necessary. Yeah, that might be a good idea. I'm currently recording audio on my computer on my condenser mic, so if I were to switch over... Oh no, dear God, take us back. That being said though, the audio here isn't unbearable, and you can kind of make out what I'm saying even though the echo and quality doesn't exactly help make it feel like quality content. I'll switch back now. Like I said before, if this were an amateur product, I would be fine with passing it off as amateur, as a project from the early days of YouTube. But it's not. This is a film that was put on shelves to purchase from 2016. Meanwhile, incredible pieces of animated work are put up on YouTube basically for free. I mean, have you seen AimKid's animation of Neil C. Sariga's Soft Fuzzy Man? I could watch this shit for hours. The audio in this film is so bad that when combined with the non sequitur writing, the poor lighting that makes it hard to see which characters are which, and the horrible framing that doesn't know who its main characters are, I truly could not understand this figurative train wreck of a film.
To put it in the simplest terms I can, there's too much echo and not enough clarity, like they've recorded the audio on a 2004 Nokia phone. There are segments where the sound effects that they've layered over top of everything makes it actually impossible to hear what anyone is saying, and there's no way that the directors heard what their film sounds like and said, Yeah, that's fine. If I'm to give them any benefit of the doubt here, it would be that they didn't record with a proper microphone, and in editing they threw in sound effects without even bothering to change the levels. At best, they're lazy, and at worst, they're aliens who don't know what a film is. There's one point later in the film where one character straight up stabs another character to death, but you can't hear any of the dialogue leading up to the murder because of this film's insistence on overlaying these looping ambient bird sound effects and wind whistles with little to no adjustment on the levels. Did you catch that? Neither did I. And if you remember towards the beginning of the video, I mentioned that every time the narrator wants to switch perspective, a loud beeping sound is heard, compounding even more auditory issues together. Towards the beginning of the film, the music that they used very obviously loops back on itself. Later in the film, one of the characters has her pre-recorded line replayed. They couldn't even be bothered to ask her to re-record the line or record a second line. That's just how lazy this film is.
There's no sugar.
There's not a whole lot else for me to say in regards to the audio in this film. It's bad. For getting this far, I think I owe you guys an explanation of what's going on in this film, or at least what I understand what's going on in this film, because it's very vital to the next segment of the video. So the narrator, I don't fucking know who he is, but he's very interested in the events that transpired 6 days prior to his arrival in the city. There we find out that this city, which we'll call Austin because this film was allegedly filmed in Austin, Texas, is home to several superpowered individuals. Their superpowers were granted to them by this radioactive rain that we know very little about. But what I understand is that it burns the skin, and people with more reddish makeup have more recently received their powers. This is also apparently an apocalyptic movie from 1 or 2 shots that insinuate it, but I seriously tend to doubt it. There's several factions of superpowers within Austin that have discovered that there's this girl of prophecy that has the power to destroy the entire city. Just like virtually every other thing with a child or thing with predetermined limitless power, just about everyone is after it. The baddies want to use her power to control and strike fear into the heart of Austin, while the goodies are after her to bring them into the Allegiance of Powers and force out crime for good. The 2 main characters we don't see until halfway into the film, and they are christened as the main characters in this sequence that has dubstep where they repeat nothing but the word pants over multiple times. Listen, I don't make the rules. I know we YouTubers hate wearing pants. Yet despite everything supposedly being the end of the world, it definitely doesn't feel that way, though that's kind of due to something that you can't control on a much lower budget.
Sets are very important for setting up the tone and atmosphere of a movie, but the set choices Allegiance of Powers makes are atrocious. Let me give you some examples. There's a scene where these 2 characters, Lee Sin and Typhoid Mary, are checking out a corpse, as you do, while communing with corporate Santa Claus from the future. Top 10 lines I wasn't expecting to say in my life, number 1 will surprise you. They choose to film on a kid's playground, which is a strange choice to say the least. If you look up the budget on Allegiance of Powers, it's somewhere around $2,000, so you can't expect them to afford any fancy sets or high quality studios to film in, which is fair enough, but what you can do on any budget is choose when you film. Of all the days you could choose, you choose a day kids are not at school. There's just a bunch of kids running around having the time of their lives while they're trying to film this serious moment. Just imagine being a parent, taking your kids to the park, and you see No Eyes McGee and Bootleg Two-Face desecrating a corpse behind police tape while some guy films them. The worst part about this is that this scene is not the worst offender for bad set choice. Going back 15 minutes into the movie, we see yet another character. You'll see a lot of those, by the way, visiting the grave as someone we can only assume was someone near and dear to them. After a few grunts and loosely strung together words, we are met with what is probably the most inappropriately dressed character with a thong so high that her hips don't lie, and I'm starting to feel this right. Moving on. They exchange a few words, but you can't hear what they're saying because the sound of the trees are louder than their voices. Seems like a regular setting, right? Now here's the kicker. Whose grave is that? No, let me reiterate. Whose grave is that? That is not a prop. That is a literal grave. They are filming on a dead man's grave while Goth Girl and Singular Backstreet Boy monologue. I mean, he's not gonna complain and all, but I can't help but feel there's something morally wrong about filming on someone's grave. And then there's the J.J. Abrams room.
The only good thing that came out of the J.J. Abrams room was that I could actually see characters in there. The bad thing is that I couldn't see anything else, and that the characters I could see, I didn't know who they were because the poorly mixed audio and the unwatchable, overly edited camera shots made it impossible to find that out beforehand.
But there was one set location that struck me as moderately decent. At one point in the film, two heroes meet in a parking lot, trying to make sense of the madness that's taking over the city, and it was such a normal setting that I almost forgot how terrible this film was. The crushing reality set back in when I asked myself the following question. What is this character wearing? As we both mentioned before, the total budget for this film was about $2,000, and I can't imagine that there was too much room on that front for costume design. The directors were in way over their heads after all. That got me thinking about the rest of the film though. What truly sells this film as terrible are the terrible costume designs, and set locations are a close second. It's equally as possible to have a film to have bad writing, directing, and lighting and all of that, and still look at least somewhat professional. I mean, heck, look at any action movie starring Bruce Willis in the last decade. One of the rules of thumb that you want to have when it comes to character costumes is having your character wear something or be dressed up in a way that indicates what their personality will be like. A politician character, I'd expect to have some sort of dark blazer jacket with a white undershirt and a tastefully chosen plain colored tie, with their hair perfectly kept and a fake smile to top it all off. It's that sort of appearance that gives the character a sort of sense of confidence and control. And although this supposed character hasn't even said a word yet, we can already assume what their personality is going to be like. And then you have the question of framing and lines by any character, but it's always by the appearance which we judge a character first.
Cybersting and Egotan look like they've been dressed up in very enthusiastic Halloween costumes, which makes them the most appropriately dressed characters given that they seem amateur and recruit people for their allegiance of powers through YouTube videos. Their casual and amateur attitudes beget a casual look, and vice versa. The other characters though? Well, this man is just every jock at the gym with his gray tank top. This man has been recently blinded with the bandages and blood over his eyes. This man is part cyborg for some reason. These three women characters are women, and that's about as much personality was written for them. This character is a wannabe furry, and he's the star of my favorite part of the film, where he just awkwardly stares at the camera for a solid 3 seconds.
One part that always stuck with me is the random banana that one of the characters catches during a fight scene. It's super intense, and then banana.
But if you were to ask me what any of these characters were named or what their powers were, if I remember them after the credits rolled, I'd say no, because most of them were dressed in street clothes and I couldn't hear what they were saying anyway. This ruse unintentionally sort of works for the main female character because her whole deal is that she's supposed to be an enigma throughout the film, so having her hide in plain sight works just as well. But even then, that's giving Allegiance of Powers more credit than it's due. What really tops all these characters off, and this movie as a whole, are the special effects that were used. And they were used terribly. I don't really have a clever piece for this segment, nor is there anything eloquent left for me to say, so here's just a sweet little montage of some of the special effects that were used in this film. There's also this one segment where the characters from Cybersting and Egotan read out their adventures like it's out of a comic book, which is complete with this god-awful comic book text that, like the segment, is at a complete disconnect from the rest of the movie thematically. The audio here was clearly pre-recorded, but no one took the time to edit it down or have anyone do retakes because you can clearly clear? Wow. The audio here was clearly pre-recorded, but no one took the time to edit it down or have anyone do retakes. They slip over some words, you can clearly hear them licking their lips or taking a breath in between lines.
Here's another example. If I'm on screen and I'm taking breaths in between sentences or commas and stuff, that's not nearly as distracting if it's done here, on camera. Conversely, what I can do is cut between every line of dialogue, which I've already done for this video, but it does prove to be kind of distracting with me blinking everywhere every few seconds. And that's also a kind of YouTube exclusive editing technique that I'm allowed to do. And now if I take away the camera,
and cut back to here, you'd never be able to tell when and where I cut my audio, so long as I do my takes properly. If I don't cut at all and do this all in one take without doing it over until I get the right cut, and without cutting for me to take a breath, then this becomes far more distracting. And it's something that I wish I'd realized earlier with my previous video essays. At any rate, the movie ends with this pseudo-heroic moment where Cybersting and Egotan are seen fighting off waves of shadow people. Who are they? We actually have no idea, because they were never established in the first place. The city collapses, the wannabe furry is crushed by a CG effect of a falling skyscraper, and we fast forward in time to the narrator once more. Yeah, I bet you forgot about him too. He asks his computer who Cybersting and Egotan are and if they're alive, to which the computer replies with that the narrator killed them 5 days ago. Now, if you remember, the film started off by showing off events from 6 days prior, and if Cybersting and Egotan are technically alive at the end of this film, then everything that happened in the film happened in the span of 1 day. That's right, everything from the fight in the warehouse, to the assembling of the Allegiance of Powers in your mom's apartment building, to this guy pulling out the Iron Fist and leveling this woman out of nowhere, to the main girl being found, dying, and then being resurrected just to die again in a few seconds, to the J.J. Abrams room, to the slide to the left, one hop this time. All of that? 1 day. Pacing truly is a bitch and a half, isn't it?
and that's Allegiance of Powers, quite possibly the worst film that I've ever seen. Now, while I was writing this script, I did a Google search for the film and found a couple of interesting things. What I found was this Indiegogo campaign from 2014 that completely fell flat on its face. What this was supposed to fund was an Allegiance of Powers TV show, with 24 episodes listed to be in the making. And with the knowledge that I have now, I'd wager to guess that this film was meant to be an end to the first season, taking all of your favorite characters from the TV show and putting them in for one last hurrah finale.
The goal was $100,000 US, yet the campaign slammed shut on a comparatively measly 460 from no less than 19 backers, 300 of which was spent on this reward here, which gave whoever dropped that amount of cash the set design credit on IMDb. Sexy, action, comedy, horror. I can assure you that the film had none of these. Scrolling down the page, there's a variety of pictures and sneak peek clips from the series, and the pictures feel awkward because most of them look like they were taken from various people's Facebook pages from 2010, and not from the set of a superhero series. The pictures that do look like they've been taken from the series have been put in the wrong aspect ratio somehow, so they often look squished on the page. Other ones that haven't been constrained by limitations of the Indiegogo website look completely different from the way they look in the film, with massive over-editing and random lens flares or effects being added over top. Throughout this incredibly long scroll down, there's this pseudo Q&A segment that the Crumb Brothers attempt to answer any possible quells that they see people having with the film, or questions that might come up with things like, where does my money go? And what's the story here? And what are the perks for? Yet every answer is written with great disregard to proper English grammar, and while they may think that they've answered as directly as possible, it's clear that very little planning went into this project to begin with, and they're using this segment to fill the page. If I'm to be more blunt about it, I feel like they filled the page with whatever they could think of in regards to their project because they saw that's what other campaigns do, and those ones get lots of money for their projects. It screams amateur, and they're clearly way in over their heads on this one.
Gerald and Michael are published authors as well.
Well, given how the film was written, I'm scared to read those books.
I now has a baby boy and a full-time job.
Well, congratulations.
Lol.
Lol.
At the end of the day, I want to be mad at this film because I'm a bitter person and I felt physically assaulted by the sheer lack of quality that was present in this film. The fact that the creators call themselves published authors and have all this hullabaloo about how their film was made and their life story and stuff could make me upset, but it's just more revealing for them. Allegiance to Power is probably the worst film that I've ever seen, and it's because it's fallen victim to the one thing that all films, all bad films specifically, regardless of experience, fall victim to: utter incompetence. In summary, it's the kind of film that I'd be afraid of making myself, but seeing as this is rock bottom in terms of quality, I think I could make something better than this. That's all I have for this one. I'd like to thank my friend MoonWalker for introducing me to this film and suffering through it with me. The man doesn't upload that often, but when he does, it's quality. You won't be disappointed, and his link is in the description below. You should go ahead and drop a subscription on his channel because it will send his serotonin levels through the roof. And as for me, I'm kind of like neck deep in school and editing for Scooch, so I don't know when my next video will be, but what I do know is that I want to try and cut back on other content right now and just explicitly focus my channel on reviews for a little while. If you need more content or want to contact me, I'm on Twitch and Twitter at the handles in the description and also probably on screen right now. And if you're new here and this is kind of the video content that you're looking for, go ahead and smash that heckin' subscribe button like it's a beer bottle, and I don't know where this analogy is going, but that's all I have for this one. Thank you all so much for suffering through it with me, and I'll see you all on the flip side. Goodbye.